everybody. I'm so honored to guys have you everybody here tonight. I'm Jenny Gold, and I'm the founder of Jenny's Gold Standard and Podcast. And tonight we have a very special guest on tonight. As many of you know, I've always been interviewing people about autoimmune diseases, and my guest tonight, or this evening, I should say, is Gregory Proctor. And Gregory has a form of MMA. Everybody's going, what is that? Wrestling? Think MMA, right? But it's a very serious illness, and it's so rare that I can't even find out if MMA is an autoimmune disease. Gregory can tell you all about that. And tonight, we'll soon find out that Gregory is an introvert most of his life. Yeah, I think you'll find that hard to believe when you meet him. But things have changed. And he honestly really has a story. He does. So I hope that you'll all listen. I really do. Sorry, I just had bacon. So anyway, he's a veteran of the Navy. But maybe it's time to bring Gregory out now. Gregory, are you ready? I was gonna speak a little bit more, but I'd like to have you come on now.
No worries.
Yes, please.
Certainly, Jenny. Thank you for having me on board as a featured guest on the Gold Standard. I'm definitely enamored and honored that you reached out to me. Obviously, my story, as you were alluding to, is something that is quite devastating news. I always look at devastating news and try to figure out a way to turn that into something positive. Yes. And I think as we go through our discussion this afternoon, you'll understand what really drives me and really has kept me focused beyond the pain, beyond the cancer, and all the other negative things that you deal with when you're in a certain situation like I am and dealing with the disease called multiple myeloma. So,
oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say what makes me really sad about myself. It's like, I can deal with this tonight because I practice this. I'm like, I can deal with this. Like, I haven't had to deal with this form of cancer with anybody before. And it was frustrating for me. And I know it's very frustrating for you, is that you can tell me if this is an autoimmune disease or not. I cannot find any information on that. I mean, it's so rare. What you have is so rare. And people don't know that. They think it's probably the skin kind. Maybe it'll get into your muscles. Well, it's way more advanced with you. And I don't think people understand what this is. And that's why I wanted you to come on. I really want to thank Rachel Beck, because I met her, and then I met you through her. I asked her to get me in contact with you because I thought, oh my gosh, we got to get this story out because it's so important, right? It's very important. And I just want you to tell everybody about this, because I was going to say, though, the big thing I was going to come out with was you've been down this road with multiple doctors, like many people with autoimmune diseases have. It's become a very stressful thing on you and your family, your wife and the kids, your extended family, right? And it becomes a huge issue with insurance, which we can talk about if you want to, because you had that issue today, as did I. And the cost of this is just, I can't even imagine, because as I want you to tell people, as you said, you would talk about anything, where you are right now in your healing to be able to heal, and what it will cost after you have bone marrow transplants and stem cell transplants and all that. Like, what kind of cost is this going to have for you? Right.
Well, I tell you, let me just kind of give a quick synopsis so that everybody understands what multiple myeloma is.
Thank you.
So the disease of multiple myeloma is basically, it's a cancerous plasma cell buildup in the bone marrow, and it forms multiple tumors in different bones throughout the body. And basically what the cancer does is it produces an abnormal antibody, which is what they call the M protein. And that M protein is produced in large quantities, and it's very harmful. And if a lot of people understand what happens with the proteins in your body, it basically helps you ward off diseases and infections. And in the case of what I have going on, since it has disrupted my ability to fight infections, and obviously disrupted a lot of my healthy bones where the tumor was found. It also can lead to very, very severe kidney failure as well. And
Mhm.
so the unique thing about multiple myeloma is people go, well, how bad is it? Well, multiple
Mhm.
myeloma at this point in time here in the US, there's about 32,000 cases that are diagnosed annually.
Mhm.
And about 12,000 of those cases don't make it. So it's a very rare, uncommon disease. It makes up about 1% of the cancer cases
Mhm.
worldwide, and it's the second most common type of blood cancer outside of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So if that puts that into perspective for everybody, that kind of gives you, kind of some clarity. The unique thing about multiple myeloma is the fact that it's not on a prerequisite for people to look at. And so what I mean by that is it's not one of those early detection type of cancers like you would do with breast cancer or something
Mhm.
else. And so what typically happens with multiple myeloma is when you find out you have the disease, you're already well beyond, stage 1, stage 2. You're probably in a very late stage
Mhm.
of the cancer. And at that point, it's already wreaking havoc on your body. And for me, back in June, when I was finally officially diagnosed after all of the pain that I was going through
Mhm.
based on my lower back pain and then this tumor sitting on my sciatic nerve, which was located in my upper right pelvic area. I was enduring the amount of discomfort that I thought that no person should ever have to endure without having some type of relevant information. I mean, it was like the first time my wife and I went to the doctor and we realized they were throwing out all these new terms, multiple myeloma, tumor, this, that, and the other. And we're like, what are these things? And so we had to become students of understanding what we were dealing with just so we could get our head wrapped around it. And like you mentioned in the introduction, I've spent countless amount of hours in research, talking to multiple doctors, looking at clinical trials, literally everything I could possibly do to try to figure out how I could ward this off and have a better quality of life. Because between the months of June and probably August, I couldn't walk, I couldn't tie my shoes. I needed assistance basically to do a lot of things for me because the cancer in my body had pretty much taken over. It had wreaked havoc with my body. I was dealing with a lot of bone lesions and other
Right.
various associated things that were causing me so much discomfort that I couldn't even sleep vertically. I had to sleep I couldn't sleep horizontally. I had to sleep vertical. And if anyone can
Mhm.
imagine, particularly in the military, sleeping vertical is hard enough when you're standing watch, but certainly when you're in the comforts of your own home and you're trying to sleep horizontal and you can't do that, that's
Yeah.
really, really hard. And it causes you to lose quite a bit of
Yeah.
sleep deprivation over a period of consistent time.
So I was going to say, backing up because I had my little crying fit, because that
Sure.
usually happens. I warned you about that. I warned you about that the other day. Sorry about that. I never
No
said
worries.
where Gregory was from. He lives in Houston right now. And
San
guys,
Antonio.
we have San Antonio. I'm sorry, San Antonio. But what do they have down there? They have Mayo Clinic. They have MD Anderson.
Mhm.
They have all the big shots. And
Mhm.
Gregory, how can they help you? I mean, can any of these big cancer places help you or not? Or are you going to have to go up to, was it Pennsylvania or New York, get some of
Well,
this done?
I'm
What
glad.
are your next steps?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because when we first started down this track of trying to figure out where could I get the proper medical attention, we immediately contacted MD Anderson there in Houston, and of course, with anyone that's dealing with cancer or any type of terminal illness, whether or not you're in network, out of network, it's all these different balls you have to juggle in air to find out if you can actually fit your health condition, your terminal illness into someone else's box. And that's very, very sad. And so what happened for us is we ended up contacting MD Anderson, and MD Anderson called my insurance. My insurance company said, well, unfortunately, they're not in network, even though they said they were in network. And so it's going to cost me about $50,000 just to see them, just for them to even see me. And so immediately my wife and I said, okay, we got to go to plan B. And so we went to plan B, which was basically contacting folks that were, in network based on the approved list that we got from the insurance company. And Dana-Farber Cancer Institute out of Boston was there. But then we started scratching our head. We're saying, okay, wait a minute. We live in San Antonio. We have to travel to Dana-Farber in Boston. And so when it's time for me to go through this this heinous procedure called stem cell transplant, what is that going to look like for us? What is our cost of living going to be for so many weeks, so many months? Am I going to be able to get on a plane? Am I going to be able to travel? I mean, so all these different things started to kind of go through my brain with regards to our life getting uprooted and trying to figure out what would be the best course of action to move forward. And so we went back to the list. We contacted people in Dallas. We contacted people here locally. And it was just a whole clash of trying to figure out whether or not, like I said earlier, you fit into a box based on, your insurance's requirements, not necessarily your requirements, but your insurance requirements. And so with the way things are going right now, knock on wood, we've been fortunate enough that we've got 2 facilities that our insurance company has approved. And one of them happens to be Dana-Farber in Boston. And the other one happens to be the Methodist Hospital here in the San Antonio area, which wouldn't require us to travel and basically be able to save us a little bit of money on the living expenses and accommodations that would be required if we were in Boston.
Wow. I lost you for a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm like, there's squirrely things. I don't know if that happened on your side, but it happened over here. So you're going up to Boston, correct? Are you going to, we maybe go up to Boston to see her?
Well, we're actually, at this point, we are starting tomorrow. We're starting all of my medical workups for the preliminary aspects of what will happen here in San Antonio. And then we travel up in January for Dana-Farber. So right now I'm trying to balance both ends. The important aspect of dealing with Dana-Farber is that they have, world-renowned scientists as well as, highly accredited multiple myeloma specialists, which those are the people that we're kind of like tied into right now to ensure the quality of life for me is going to be as long as I possibly can live.
I think you're going to live longer than a little bit. Because I see, this is what happens when I have a breakdown in the beginning. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't tell them. You're a very successful businessman. You are. I mean, you got out of the Navy, started up all these companies. Now he's started this nonprofit, this foundation. You can see across the bottom of the screen right now. He does have a GoFundMe going too. So please think about contributing to his GoFundMe. But he also has a whole bunch of t-shirts and mugs and all that type of stuff too that people can purchase. They can help him also on his journey. But I mean, can you please tell everybody, don't you have 3 companies? You had 3 companies, or this is something we're going to talk about because it's so difficult for anyone that knows anything about having any type of illness. And you're trying to work and you're trying not to get rid of your job or get fired or everything else. It's hard. It's hard to keep your balls all up in the air, right? And not have them fall, right? Because you still want to keep doing what you're doing. And you're a go-getter. You are totally a go-getter. So when I said you were an introvert when you were a kid, I'm like, really? Because this guy is like, I'm going to open these companies. I'm going to do this. I'm a marketer. He has a huge podcast, you guys. Can you please tell them, Gregory, about your podcast?
Sure. So, we start with the podcast. So the podcast is called Cut to the Chase. Cut to the Chase was built on a premises of friends, family, professional colleagues to talk about things that impact your ability to thrive. A lot of people go, well, oh my God, that's a mouthful. Well, think about it from the standpoint of this. Cut to the chase is really kind of, as most people say, well, it's a slang terminology. But what we require you to do is step out of those pretenses and really dive into the conversation and be vulnerable and be exposed in an aspect that you relinquish yourself to the subject matter or to the topics or to the questions. And the way I always like to describe Cut to the Chase is the fact that when you start to consider the pretenses that are out there, from a worldly stage, most common people, we can't relate to what goes on in a rich person's life, but you can surely relate to what's going on in someone's life if they live across the street from you, or if they're your brother, your sister, your mother, your cousin, or somebody like that. And so we really focus in on motivational topics. We focus in on spirituality. We focus in on overcoming challenges, triumphs, setbacks. I mean, all those different types of things are really what has made Cut to the Chase very formidable and pretty much a global wide sensation. We've got about 145 episodes out right now, 450 some odd people in the queue waiting to be on our podcast, and looking forward to much continued success as we move forward with Cut to the Chase.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I saw the different streams that you're posting this on. Well, you have 12 or 15 different streams that goes out to. Amazing. I mean, it's just, I'm just blown away. Every time you sent me something, I was like, what? I'm like, I don't know. This guy's big time, but like not me.
Yeah.
So look at that, you guys. Look at all the different podcasts he goes out, not podcasts, but the streams he goes out to.
Yeah.
So he's definitely the type of person that I wanted to talk to, because he's kind of doing what I'm doing, but a little bit on a larger scale. Right.
I'm just an average guy, Jenny. I mean, the way my parents brought me up is they always told me, just like Dr. Martin Luther King always says, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. I have so much creativity that goes on through my head, and actually multiple myeloma has pretty much cut me down quite a bit because of my energy level is, as a dear friend of mine told me a couple of days ago when he talked to me on the phone, he said, Greg, your energy level is always 1,000%. And now that you've got multiple myeloma, you may be at like 500%, but that's like normal for everybody else.
Yeah. Right. You probably walk into a place and you're like, hey, everybody. I used to do that too. It's like, hey, everybody, what's going on? They're like, how are you today? I'm like, I'm great. Do you have to play that game of I'm great? Do you always feel great, but you say you're great?
No, I don't do that. Primarily my wife tells me I'm an alien. So in a lot of cases, I mean, I get reeled back in based on Mother May I sometimes,
It is kind of funny, isn't it? You're like, okay, you're going to go and watch a movie and then go to dinner and then go hang out at a bar. And you're like, you really aren't going to do that? Maybe not.
Right.
Well, that might not be something you're going to do these days. Excuse me. But I'm so impressed with all these companies. Like, tell me about because you're a big marketer too. You're a huge marketer. So tell me about what you're doing with I can't even say it.
Sketcher?
Sketcher. Thank you. Yeah.
So Sketcher, I mean, the inception of Sketcher happened about 3 years ago. I've always had what we call a management consultancy firm, and that management consultancy firm has really kind of spun off from several other prior management consultancy firms that I had back in the early 2000s. And what we do with the management consultancy firm is we go in and we help, medium-sized to large-scale projects, anywhere from $35 million up to several hundreds of million, probably even in the billions throughout my career, where we help them manage and oversee and coordinate all of the programmatic functions, the schedule, the estimates, and the budgets that are related to either building the building or cleaning up some type of environmental activity or anything along those lines. I mean, we've done so much work, not only in the government space, but also in the biomedical, pharmaceutical, IT, automotive, mining. I've literally worked all over the world for multiple Fortune 500 companies underneath my own umbrella, and been quite successful in doing that.
So I wanted to ask you also, because you talked about this the other day. I know you were asking your doctors, well, is it something that I use, like my deodorant or my shampoo or the soap, or is it an environmental thing? Is that why I got this? Like, they're like, I don't know. Is it food I'm eating? Like, why do you think I got this? They all say to you, I don't know. How does that make you feel? And what did the doctors actually say to you in the end?
Well, it's very heart-wrenching when, you consider that you've got a cancer, and that, in the aspect of, when I first heard of the cancer, okay, well, let's just go in, let's have surgery and let's remove it. And then they tell you, well, you can't do that, Greg. It's in your blood. Well, your body's made up of blood, right? I mean, you got to have blood to live. And so, for me, what I ended up, sitting back and kind of pondering over is, how did this happen? For me, I've worked in so many different aspects of the Navy, dealing with nuclear and radioactivity, as well as, fuels and other industrialized chemicals and things like that, just being in the Navy. When I came out of the Navy, I worked in the semiconductor industry, and I did the same thing, worked around a lot of chemicals, acids, gases, high pressure, high voltage, a lot of things like that. Even in the industrialized industry underneath my own companies, I worked in a lot of different aspects. So for the doctors to come back and tell me, well, we don't know how you contracted this, and we have no idea. To me, I'm saying to myself, well, is it my toothpaste? Is it my mouthwash? Is it the water I drink? Is it somewhere I've worked? And even to this day, when you talk to thousands of people across the globe that have contracted multiple myeloma, no one can quantify or definitize where exactly the disease was contracted. And to me, that's very heart-wrenching, because more and more people, even though they say this disease is an elderly disease, which is, is something that, you're not supposed to get until you're like in your late 60s. I'm starting to see with all of the groups and support groups that I'm in right now between my wife and I, we're seeing more people in their 30s and 29 and early 40s contracting the disease a lot more rapidly than folks that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And to me, I'm scratching my head, but saying to myself that there's something in our environment that we haven't been able to quantify that we really need to get to the bottom of. And that's the importance of this early detection, because this early detection will allow for you to figure out whether or not it's in a smoldering state before it goes live, before it goes active. And that way you can ward it off without having to go through this arduous procedure that I have to go through. Or, the fact of you can start to get on what they call maintenance well in advance to keep the disease dormant, and keep it in remission.
Right. So also, I was going to mention that in the very beginning of this, that you said you just had lower back pain. They get severe lower back pain I don't even remember how long you told me, but they're running all the tests. They're running the CBC blood work. They're running MRIs. They're running CAT scans, but they didn't find anything. So when did they decide to go further to figure out if you had this?
The thing was, and that's what was so frustrating, because as you very well know, being a podcaster yourself, we spend a lot of time, as I say, butt in seat, right? So, for me,
exactly.
I have a very comfortable chair and it's ergonomically safe and, all those different things. And I just started to realize, late April, early May, I was like, my God, man, there's something really going on with my lower back, because it just started aching more and more and more every single day. And even when we would go out, my wife and I would go out for walks, all the time. Even when we go out for walks, I just have a difficult time trying to complete the course and complete the trail. And so when my wife went out of the country for a period of time, and I was stuck here home alone, which is not like being coincidental like the movie, but seriously, I was here home alone. One morning I got up and I couldn't get out of bed. And what ended up happening and what transpired is something that I had never experienced in my entire life. I literally crawled out of the bed and basically said, I can't stand up. I can't walk. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my body. And so I called my general physician. And he says, well, can you manage to get to the doctor, to the office? And I was like, well, how am I going to do that? I got to drive, or am I going to try to crawl down the stairs to Uber, And eventually I mustered up enough courage to be able to get myself into the car and get over to his office. And he examined me and he says, well, look, without going too far into detail, I think we'll just give you pretty much a steroid shot, something to reduce the inflammation. And then I want you to come back and follow up. And then, oh, by the way, take these, all of the conservative things that doctors typically do when they really don't want to have to deal with something major. So I got back. Right.
Yeah, I got pain, right?
Right. I got back home, and then of course the pain didn't ease up. It continued to fester even more aggressively. And I realized at that point, I said, I called my wife. I said, look, you need to come back. So she was trying to make provisions to get back from Peru. And I was already searching online, looking for some type of spine management specialist so that I could basically get in to see someone that was going to be more than just a general physician. And the first day I went in to see the actual spine management specialist, he told me, he said, look, based on what you've told me, based on all the information that you've got her, we really need to get you over for, an MRI, and let's see where that goes. And the first time I went over to do the MRI, they did detect a mass, but under the circumstances, since the first MRI was not done with contrast, what ended up happening is they said, we know there's something there. We don't know if it's benign. We don't know if it's cancerous. And so we need to have you come back. And so within 48 hours is when I came back, and they said, okay, look, this is what you have. And we think you need to start to get your things in order. I mean, and when doctors start telling you, hey, start getting your things in order, it's a little bit scary to hear those words kind of roll off their tongue, that get your affairs in order and really start to focus in on what's going to be next. And of course, at that point for my wife and I, it was very devastating news. I think we were so shocked that we both looked at each other, came home, sat on the couch, and we were just numb. I mean, we were just numb for 24 hours trying to get our head wrapped around, well, what does this mean for us going forward? Yeah. Because in my case, what they had detected was I had 100% bone lesions. I had a rating in my M spike number over
Wow.
6,000. So that means there was 6,000 counts of this M protein that had just consumed my body, and I don't know what that is per blood cell or so forth and so on, but it really had a hold of my body, and I had no control. And so when we finally got to a point to where we were able to see an oncologist, and she realized the severity of the problem, within 2 days of seeing the oncologist, basically they had me on chemo within 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are you still on chemo right now?
I am still on chemo right now.
Okay.
The first 2 months of my treatment was pretty much 5 days of immunization therapy and chemo. And right now I'm on once a month for chemo. The cancer is currently in remission, which that's where we need to be in order for me to get ready to go into the bone marrow / stem cell transplant.
Will you do that up in Boston, or do you do that down where you are right now in Texas?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we can do it here in San Antonio, but if things don't work out, we'll end up in Boston.
Okay. And this is a nice state, or a nice city and state, right?
Absolutely.
It will be in the middle of the winter, but it's okay. We'll get you a warm jacket and some boots, right?
Yeah, I've lived in Boston before, so certainly I'm familiar with the cold weather. When I used to work in the semiconductor industry, that was one of my first semiconductor companies I've ever worked for up there. Was called Digital Capital Equipment Corp.
Well, Gregory, guess what? We just put our first question up for you.
Okay.
But there it is. How has multiple myeloma changed you and your wife's lives? I do know, and by the way, he does have 2 daughters too.
Yes. So I think to answer this question, with regards to how has it impacted and changed our lives, I would say that it's really flipped our lives upside down, and it's required us to take a very hard look and understand our prioritizations of what we want out of life. And it's also humbled us, because my wife and I love to travel, between, the US and Peru. My wife is, like I said, from Peru. So we would frequently go back, and visit family, a couple times out of the year. And, now with everything that has happened, I really have to be focused in on quality of health. Who am I exposing myself to? And then, of course, we're in the COVID era, which I also have to be extremely cautious of, based on my immune system, is not to be, around an area where I'm going to end up contracting a flu or COVID or anything like that, because, it could be detrimental to me. So I think from a standpoint of giving you kind of, what I would consider to be my top 3 things that has really changed, it's really impacted, our relationship with regards to, we've had to really lean upon each other more than we ever have. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm grateful that I love my wife and she loves me, but we've leaned on each other so much now that we've just said, okay, we're in survival mode. We're trying to live. And I think, from a second aspect or a second note is when you start looking at the financial aspect of anyone that goes through COVID. And it doesn't matter if you have insurance. It doesn't matter if you got supplemental, you got all these different things that are out there. It's not enough. I mean, and, we realized that earlier on that we had to kind of put together a really diverse plan to make sure that we'd be able to get on the other side of this thing without dealing with, several $1 million of debt in medical bills. Because one of the things, like with my insurance company, which is kind of, I call it a FUBAR. I could actually use another word, but in my treatment cost is about $22,000 a week. And so my treatment, they pay for the drugs, they pay for me to sit there and get the drugs shot into me, and I go through all of the treatment, but they don't pay for the doctor's visit. And I'm scratching my head going, how can you not pay for the doctor? I can't even get the treatment if I don't go through the visit. I mean, it just makes no sense. And so all of these little nitnoid things, you begin to find that there's a lot of nickel and diming that goes on in the insurance and in the medical industries that really are not treating what I consider to be the patient in an ethical and proper manner, particularly if you're dealing with this terminal illness. And then the last thing I think that, I'd like to share how it's changed our lives is that, as you said, for a guy like me that has so many things going on and my mind is always thinking of things creatively, my wife and I, we were so frustrated with how hard this was to find grants, so frustrated to find, additional funding, so frustrated to listen to others that are going through some of the same extremities that we are, but they don't have the resiliency, they don't have the perseverance, they don't have the family members to help them to be able to fight. And so we ended up saying, you know what, we've got to do something about this. And that was, kind of the birthing of Cut to the Chase Foundation, is because it's so unethical to sit back and not do anything. And so, from an aspect of all the things that I've mentioned that has caused us to kind of change our life, I think those are really the top three.
That was my next question was, well, you've already answered it. So what made you decide to start the foundation?
Well, besides what I indicated, one of the things that we focused in on with Cut to the Chase Foundation was to really try and help people understand, the severity of this disease. And multiple myeloma in itself is something that, as I look at it, in the Black community, African-American community, it's wreaking rampant, in those communities, and no one has been able to figure out why. It's just like when you go ask the doctors.
I'm going to cut you off for a second because we haven't talked about that. And you had said to me the other night that a lot of cases are in the African-American community. So why? I mean, do they have any idea why?
Well, to be honest, I don't think there's really a truthful answer out there. You find a lot of things that say where the the African-American community, or they don't have the accessibility to clinical trials and proper doctor treatment and so forth and so on, or maybe it's genetic or hereditary and so forth and so on. Even in my case, I went back through and we had all of my genetics and genomic testing done to see if, by me having the disease, would my daughters contracted disease, and the answer was no. And so, it still relates back to the environment.
How do they know that?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, how do they know that? I mean, is it the house that you live in? Is it mold? Is there asbestos in your house? Like, I mean, it's so weird that they can't
pinpoint it.
Figure this out.
Right.
They can't pinpoint it.
Right.
See, I can't even say it because I was so frustrated for a minute. I was like,
Yeah.
why are they? And that happens with a lot of illnesses. Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the important things of why, myself and my wife and I, along with, our Cut to the Chase team, we've kind of partnered up with Dana-Farber to really kind of focus in on that early detection, to really look at moving the needle so that we can get people involved with understanding the severity of multiple myeloma. Because I've got business colleagues and friends and family that have said, hey, I've got lower back pain, but I haven't gone to see a doctor. And how long have you had the lower back pain? Well, it's been going on for several months. I'm like, look, you really need to go see a doctor. And then on top of that, when you go see the doctor, you have to challenge the doctor to ensure that they're testing for the right things. Because if you get a standard 14 panel CBC, you won't see anything regarding multiple myeloma. Nope. You've got to do a multiple myeloma blood panel work and be able to see that. And so it's all of these educational tidbits, or as I call them, checklists or awareness insights that I think are so important. It's why we really focused in on developing, Cut to the Chase as a foundation to get the news out there, to get the word out there, and to be able to help those that are in need, because those that are in need are really struggling to find, well, where am I going to be able to make groceries? How am I going to be able to pay for X, or how am I going to pay for Y? Particularly when you start figuring out that your maintenance drug costs for a single pill is $700 or $1,000 or $1,500. I mean, it's literally ridiculous how much pharmaceutical companies are charging for some of the things that you have to have in order to be able to survive.
Well, you're talking about the fact that medication, the pill that you have to take after your bone marrow transplant, did you say it was like tens of thousands of dollars, or did I hear that incorrectly? I don't know. Maybe I did.
Yeah. So my wife and I, in our Facebook groups, the multiple myeloma Facebook groups, we go out and we ask people that are, they're ahead of us, and we want to know what they dealt with through their experiences. And a lot of people that I've been able to connect with, they actually have the same type of disease that I have. We've gone through our records, and we're within like 1% of each other in our readings, in our lab readings. And so one of my dear friends out of Colorado, his name is Greg as well. He basically said his maintenance cost is $30,000 a month for a single pill. $30,000 a month for a single pill. So I'm going, how do you afford a Mercedes every single month when you're trying to just stay alive? I mean, it's just hideous. It's just crazy, absolutely nuts.
It is.
But for him, he's got, his employer, and employee insurance and all that stuff is being taken care of. But, the average people that are out there right now, you look at how many people lost their jobs in COVID, or how many people that may or may not be working right now, or on disability, or whatever the case may be, that cost is just too much to bear. I mean, it's just way too much to bear. So,
so sad. It's very sad because you kind of sit back and go, do I really want to live? Should I just go tour the world and, hey, if I get COVID, I get COVID, whatever, I call the C. If I get the C, then I get it. Because, I mean, what's worse, having that or having what you have? It's kind of like, do you just have your life and keep living your life, or try to get better? I mean, people seriously think about these things now, because we just, sometimes we go, what? By the way, you guys, everybody, he's had his 3 COVID shots, and he's okay if I tell you that, because when he gets his stem cell or the bone marrow transplant, all of his vaccines from childhood until now are completely wiped out, completely. Correct. So, I mean, for him right now, even when he's in chemo, it's very dangerous for him to be out at all, because if you think about it, he could pick that up in a heartbeat. Anything. He could pick up the flu, a cold, like anything. Anybody that has cancer knows this if they're getting chemo or radiation right now.
Yeah. It's extremely it's a different life.
Not to be negative.
Yeah, no.
Right? They had the crying thing, right?
It's a different life to have to be extremely cautious and conscientious of every step you make in your life. I mean, a lot of times, you go through life kind of carefree, footloose, and fancy free, and then when you get something like this, requires you to kind of take a step back and, like I said earlier on, really understand where your priorities are and stay focused on the objectives of what's important. Because the other thing for me that I'm dealing with right now, outside of all the other things that I've dealt with, is what I consider to be chronic fatigue. And a lot of people that have cancer typically know that you get, a major case of fatigue. And so for me, my fatigue kicks in right on the nose of like 1:30, 2 o'clock Central Standard Time every single day, which requires me to take a power nap, or requires me to basically shut down. And a lot of people go, well, what exactly is that like? The best analogy I can give anybody when I talk about this chronic fatigue is the Energizer Bunny commercial. And so you're comparing the Energizer Bunny commercial with, your typical battery cell. And your typical battery cell, once it goes dead, that's what your body feels like. Your body feels like it can do nothing, until you actually recharge, recoup, or rest. I mean, because, you just don't have the energy to function. And so for me, it happens to me, like I said, every single day. And it's one of the things that I wish, if there was a clinical trial out there, sign me up, because with me not having energy throughout the day, I am desperately looking to get my energy level back up to normal.
Exactly. I know it's really hard, because you're just like, well, because you're sitting around all the time, right? You're going to the doctor's offices, but what else are you doing? It's kind of like, what are other types of things are you doing to keep yourself going, other than talking to me? I'm just kidding. Or talking to other people on your podcast, right?
Right.
Because these types of things keep me busy, or keep me alive, to be honest with you.
Right. So a typical day for me, since I didn't share this with obviously the notion of how my life has changed. I've had to really go back and really focus in on, one, my Christianity and my faith, which I had kind of gotten away from. Second thing is my physical fitness, because when you're taking dexamethasone and you're dealing with all of these different types of drugs, I mean, it wreaks havoc on your body, increases your overall sugar levels in your body. And it requires you to really, if you don't want to gain a bunch of weight, which I've gained about 30 pounds, is to be active. And so my wife and I, we've been, walking, 25 to 30 miles a week, just so that I can kind of not go over 200 pounds. I started this journey at about $170, $165, and now I'm about 200 pounds.
I like how you said this journey.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm trying to stay within the limitations of that, because even at 200 pounds for me, it's a lot, for me to carry, and then obviously it provides me with a lot of discomfort. And so, I'm trying to get back to being somewhat physically fit in the aspect of not only getting prepared for this SCT, but also to try to keep myself in a manner of strength and mental conditioning, to be able to kind of see the other side of this procedure that I've got to go through.
So before we talk about the SCT, I was just going to say hi to some people in the comments because we missed a couple people that actually said hi to you. I don't think you know them. You might know them, but they're all saying to stay safe. Some are in Florida, some are in Arizona. But there's Nancy Lewis Hull is here from Florida, and so is Howard Kaufman. And Howard wanted to talk to you about the toothpaste and mouthwash I told you about in the respray. Because he's working with a lot of people with cancer. I shouldn't say he's working with them, but their products actually help when your mouth starts to get kind of icky, like you get sores and everything.
You get the sores and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll talk to him about that later. But also, since Strickland came in here and said hi, Kenny D, we call him, he lives in Sugar Land, and he said hi to you too. So
hello to everybody.
Yeah. So he said hi to you, but I just wanted you to know that there are people here that are they're looking out for you right now and really tuned in today because they wanted to hear what you had to say. They had no idea what this was about. And there were some veterans that came over from Instagram that actually were watching too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I certainly appreciate everybody's support, thought, and prayers. I'm a huge component of knowing that prayers do get answered. I mean, I certainly believe that. A little tidbit about that statement is because once we decided to go back and rekindle our faith with the Lord Jesus Christ, we realized that prayers were being answered in the aspect of how well my body was recovering that the doctors could not explain. I'm in the 90 percentile of basically going through what we would consider to be a very low dosage of chemo, low dosage of dexamethasone for the period of time that I've gone through. But the responsiveness of my body has been, like I said, in the high 90 some odd percentile to where everything's been on track for me to get the cancer into remission within 3.5 to 4 months as originally planned. Yeah.
Wow, that's so amazing. And you were starting to talk about that other treatment. I cut you off because I wanted to say hi to everybody for you and just let them know that you care about them, or they care about you, excuse me. But you're talking about this other treatment you're going to go on next?
Yeah. So with regards to, it's kind of what I consider to be a 3-pronged stage when you're dealing with multiple myeloma. The first thing is to get the cancer eradicated, and a lot of people go eradicate it. Yeah, basically you want to kill off all the cells of the cancer in your body and ensure that it has what they call the lowest minimal residual disease detection in your body before you go into the SCT, which is the stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant. And basically what that consists of is I will go through, which starts tomorrow, I'll go through and get all of my prerequisites done just to make sure my body can handle everything that they're going to throw at me. And then they will harvest. They will harvest about 10 million, anywhere between 5 to 10 million stem cells that they will remove from my bone marrow. And that will give me enough stem cells, not only to do the first autologous stem cell transplant, but if I have to go back and do a second or even a third, just in case the cancer comes back, then I have those stem cells already frozen and be able to kind of not have to go back through the harvesting again. And so once the harvesting is completed, they will inject my body with melphalan, which is a very high dose of chemo. And what that melphalan will do is it will kill off any and all cells that are left. And basically, once my white blood cell and red blood cell count reaches 0, then they will inject me back with my stem cells that they've cleaned up, and they'll allow for my body to basically regen all of my stem cells, and then of course monitor me for the next 7 or 21 days to ensure that my red blood cell and white blood cell count comes back up to a level to where I can actually be released from the hospital. So it's a pretty intense process, which you go through step 1, then there's step 2, and then obviously step 3 is just the maintenance. Once you've gotten to a point to where they'll release you from the hospital, they monitor you for 4 to 5 months. They start to kind of get you revaccinated, and then you stay on your maintenance drugs for the period of time, hopefully indefinite, as long as the cancer doesn't come back.
So how long does it take? I'm going to put you on my calendar so I can schedule you so you come back on and tell me how great you're doing. So see, I can put a calendar right now, right?
Yeah,
look at my calendar. We'll do it that way. No, just kidding.
Well, certainly.
Yeah.
certainly tomorrow, after going through all of the prerequisites,
Mhm.
we'll have the schedule all laid out. And certainly, my wife and then all of our social media folks that have been working kind of behind the scenes,
Yeah.
kind of keeping my story out there in the forefront. That information will be accessible for those that are interested in basically knowing what are the next steps. So once we start the harvesting of
Right.
my stem cells, right through the completion of me being released from the hospital, that's going to probably hopefully happen throughout the month of January, early part of February.
Okay. See, I have to put you on the counter. I'm just kidding. Like, you have to come back on my calendar before I fill up. People like asking about you. I'll be like, hey, you guys, it's going to be on 2 weeks. I promise. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I definitely want you to come back on though and tell us how you're doing. I will follow you through social media too. But
Absolutely.
I should meet your wife so she can let me know too how you're doing.
Sure. I can arrange that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
But this has been such a telling story today because I got upset at the beginning because I was like, I'm not going to get upset. This is like whatever, but it's not whatever. This is a very serious conversation because so many people don't know about this. When I told people I was having you on, they're like, are you with the skin cancer? I'm like, no, not that kind. So they're like, what is it then? People don't know what it is. And I think it's really interesting that we'll get this out for you for sure.
Yeah, well, I know throughout my network on LinkedIn and everybody throughout the podcast worldwide that knows us, when the news broke, most people were just like the people that you spoke to. They were like, "Huh? What is that?" And when you start saying it's a blood cancer, it's uncommon, people start scratching their heads, and then the next thing you know, they start asking you for information because at that point they're just inquisitive. And so many, I would probably say 90 some odd % of the people that I was aware of, even my own family, was like saying to me, we have never heard of this type of cancer. And I would basically say, hey, neither have I, but I'm having to live with it.
But did most people think that it was leukemia?
Most people did think it was
leukemia or blood cancer. That's what people think.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people did think it was leukemia.
Okay. But it's not that. It's not that. You're probably thinking, I wish it was that, right? That'd be better. But I don't know if any of the cancers are great. But we're so happy they're on here.
In the case of that particular cancer, it would be a little bit harder to go through the process that I have to go through because I would not be able to utilize my own stem cells. I would have to have a donor.
Oh,
and a lot of times that is extremely hard to come by is to find a donor.
Yes.
And of course, when you go through the allo process, there's two different processes. There's a autologous process, and then there's an allo process. And the difference being one you use your own cells, and the other one you use the donor cells. Is the fact that your body may reject, the donor cells, and then considering the fact that the chemo's already been injected into your body and killing off all the cells, and your body begins to reject those cells. That could be problematic. And so I'm fortunate to be where I am, even though it's very rare. My case is what they call IgA Kappa Light, and it is
sounds
it's very,
like a sorority.
Yeah,
that sounds like a fraternity or a sorority. Sorry, I broke into your conversation, but I was like, I've never heard of that either.
Yeah, there's the irony of this is when they say multiple myeloma, there is so many different categories for multiple myeloma, and some are more heinous than others. But certainly, when you start diving into the science behind how it attacks your immunization system, how it attacks the proteins, your chromosomes, and what it does to the chromosomes, and how it hatches and cuts and mutates and all these different other various things, it is a mad science project. And sometimes I feel like I've just gone through the thesis of learning about multiple myeloma in a very short period of time while I've got the disease. Yeah.
And Gregory, do you know who this is, or do you know what this is right here? The VOWR tech?
I have no idea.
Okay. Right. Just curious. So Tim Solomon, who I was talking to you about the other day, who has leukemia, and he's in remission right now. I interviewed him in June or May.
Oh, okay.
Actually, was it May or June? But he's in remission right now. So I wanted him to hear your story also because he has a cancer podcast that will be on later this evening. that he would love for you. I'd love for you to listen to that and also think about being on their show. But I know they're a couple months out right now, but it sounds like you may have already gotten your bone marrow transplant and you'll be back in great health. Right?
Yeah.
Like, sure.
I'm looking forward to the other side, as they call it, the rebirth. I'm looking forward to coming out on the other side and being a new person, as they all say.
Yes. I know, right? It'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting. It'll be like, Jenny, I don't know who you are. I'll be like, okay. But you know what? Why don't we put up, we have a movie that you sent us of your
the t-shirt campaign.
Yeah, the t-shirt campaign. Let's see if we can get that up for you. I'm gonna get up there. I will. You know what? I will. Oh, there.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh, there it goes. It doesn't want to go anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're having a great t-shirt campaign with mugs. You want to tell everybody about that and your GoFundMe really quick? They're
sure, absolutely.
Up in an hour. But yeah, please, you can finish this for us. Be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we have a t-shirt campaign. It's called Multiple Myeloma Hope and Awareness. And basically, the proceeds from that campaign is basically being utilized to kind of offset the costs for what we consider to be out-of-pocket expenses, like I was talking about through the podcast. 100% of the proceeds are pretty much being donated to that. The t-shirts were designed by our Cut to the Chase designer out of Canada. And I think he did a wonderful job, and it's a high quality t-shirt. And also we have what they call Yeti cups that are on there as well on the website. But certainly limited edition. We certainly appreciate any donations, contributions, or participation that you may have to contribute to that. The shirts come in white and black, and the cups are in white. The black ones are not quite released yet, but certainly we're hoping to have those available. Wonderful. And then with regards to the GoFundMe page, my wife started that several months back. I think, that was based on the fact of us understanding, it was kind of funny and very ironic. I'll share this quick story. My doctor called me and said, we're going to have to stop your treatment. And we're like, what do you mean we have to stop the treatment? Well, your insurance hasn't paid out yet. And you've accumulated about $250,000 in debt already. And so I was like, you have to be kidding me. $250,000 they haven't paid. So needless to say, my wife said, well, I think it's time for us to get some funding going and look at grants and other various things, because we're going to come up with $250,000 to be able to pay. So we managed to work out with our doctors to focus in on getting that all squared away, as well as beating as I say, a wet noodle over my insurance company to be able to get them on board and keep them aligned. But we've had quite a bit of success in moving the needle in the right direction and not having to come up with that $250,000 to pay. Yeah.
That's just, it makes my skin crawl. It does. Just makes my skin crawl, because it's so, the whole insurance thing is just, we don't even talk about that, but it's really difficult for a lot of different illnesses, but especially for ones like yours, because people haven't heard of it. So you got to get the education out there like you're doing right now, and just keep getting that out there so people will understand better why they should donate to your cause. Sure.
So certainly, you can find me on LinkedIn, Gregory O. Proctor. You can find me on Facebook, Gregory O. Proctor. Cut to the Chase, as it's spelled, the KUT2, the Chase podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all social media platforms, as well as all podcast platforms. And then, I think my wife is hopefully here right after the first of the year. We'll have our website up with regards to Cut to the Chase Foundation. And, folks will be able to tune in to that for more information and details. And my story's out there. I'm an open book, very transparent guy, and full of energy. Actually, I have more energy when I don't have multiple myeloma than what I have now.
I know, he's like, you can ask me anything you want. I'm like, anything? So you're starting to make some questions, or you might hear things you don't want to hear. No, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, I'm so glad you came on tonight. I'm sure everybody else is too. And we all have learned so much tonight. Hey, does anybody have any questions that you want to put in the comments before we go? Or like do the do 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 do, right? Any questions? But I always ask because you just never know if somebody has a question, right? Like, so there's so many things, more things that people could ask. They're probably sitting there going, I just don't know, right?
Yeah.
Just don't know. Sorry, I don't have that. It's really cold here, but it's not cold where you are. My nose is I don't want to sneeze. Anyway.
Well, certainly you can provide the means for people to get in contact with me,
right,
via the podcast or anything like that. I mean, I'm open for sharing, educating, increasing awareness,
right.
To anybody that is curious about multiple myeloma. We do it pretty much every single day. I mean, you mentioned stories earlier about people just wanting to give up, and
right.
we heard a story last night. My wife and I heard a story last night of a lady in Holland or the Netherlands or something like that. Based on the government system over there, they've pretty much shut her off from any type of treatment. And so everyone in the feed here in America basically said, if you can buy yourself a plane ticket, we will sponsor you to come to the U.S. and get your treatment here, since your own government won't allow for you to get any further treatment over there, because she was under the age of 35.
Wow.
Yep.
It's happening
Very
right now, isn't it? It's not just happening in the States, it's happening everywhere.
Correct.
It is. And by the way, you guys, everything will be below this video. Not the video, but the live when we're finished. So every way you get in touch with them, just click on the GoFundMe. You can click on how to get in touch with him on LinkedIn, and his podcast, all of that. So I'm really excited, though. Very excited. So thank you so much for being on tonight, Gregory. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best. I do. I wish you the best, because you've got a lot of people here praying for you too. Okay.
Yep. I appreciate it. I certainly appreciate it. And, again, I'm honored that you reached out to me. I'm blessed. I'm very grateful. I love taking these opportunities to ensure not only that I connect, but also provide a way to educate and basically, like I said, increase awareness around something that most people will look at from a negative, and I try to look at it from a positive.
It's not a negative. It's not a negative. It's just different. It's just different.
Yeah.
And people just need to know. So thank you for being on tonight.
Anything
else, guys? I don't think we have any other questions. If not, we will bid you adieu, and we'll talk to you in February after your treatment. Right?
Sounds like a plan.